Now you can see why Ron the Snowflake did not get as far as he thought he would. And I told people that if this man got far when he was implementing a lot of these draconian laws, it would be hell for American society as a whole, even for the people who downright support him for whatever reason. But before I actually get into what I'm going to talk about, I intentionally brought this picture up for a reason. Now, we know who we see right there in the middle. That is Ron the Snowflake. We all know who that is. Then you have some people that's in the background. They're like background extras in a movie. It is what it is. We don't know who any of those people are. But I want you to pay attention to the person that's standing directly next to him to our right, if you're looking at the picture, but that would be his left, wearing that brown suit. That is Christopher Rufo. You've heard me talk about him. You've heard Kid Gravity talk about him. You've definitely heard Professor Black Truth talk about him. Many of you probably got introduced to him through him. Blacklight Revelations has talked about him, and Harvey has talked about him. We've all talked about him at different times, some of us more than others, but we've mentioned that name several times. This man is one of the most staunch anti-black individuals under the age of 40 that you can think of. He's in my generation. He is the head of the Manhattan Institute. It's one of those think tanks that is very staunchly anti-black. As a matter of fact, I believe Diane Yap was a part of that think tank. And I've talked about her, and you know how she feels about us. Every chance she gets, she's getting on Twitter or X to be very anti-black every chance that she gets. So I just want y'all to understand who the Snowflake associated himself with, and it's no surprise that Christopher Rufo is standing right next to the Snowflake talking about something called the Stop Woke Act, because I would not be in the least bit surprised if Christopher Rufo helped him draft up this Stop Woke Act bullshit. But in recent news that has just come up as of today on March 5th, 2025, it says that the Federal Appeals Court has blocked the Stop Woke Act and says that it's a violation of the First Amendment. Now, I think that this is for corporate, on a corporate level. Now, of course, the Stop Woke Act, they was going after, schools, more so public schools. I think they were trying to eventually go after schools on a collegiate level, but it was something that was going to encompass everything initially. And we know what this so-called Stop Woke Act really is. I think I talked about it in a video like a year and a half ago, or maybe 2 years ago. I think I did a whole video breaking down what that Stop Woke Act is, and it is exactly what you think it is. Of course, they always bastardize woke and all this, that, and the third. So if you want to go and look at it, you can just go on to Google and type in the Stop Woke Act and see, and it should bring up what's in it. Like, what does it say line by line? And it is exactly what you think it is. So I'm going to read this article coming from the Washington Post and see what it's talking about. A federal appeals court on Monday upheld a ruling that blocked Florida from enforcing a law backed by Governor Ron DeSantis that restricts how private companies teach diversity and inclusion in the workplace. He was going to start to implement this Stop Woke Act into private sectors. In other words, in places where they create their own set of rules. That's literally overstepping your boundaries. That's why it was so easy for them to implement it on a public school level, because it's public school. But now when you start going into private areas, now there's a problem, because now you're really overstepping your boundaries. Again, I keep telling y'all, it's a good thing that this man did not make it far in that presidential race. Everybody was worried about 45 and Biden. This one right here was the one that I was really, really concerned with. After all, again, look who's standing next to him. Don't you think that if, hypothetically speaking, that if the Snowflake managed to get into that White House, he wasn't going to bring Christopher Rufo alongside him, even if he wasn't going to give him a position in the cabinet, which I'm sure Rufo would have probably denied, because then he couldn't hide in the shadows like he usually does, except for the occasional time when he pops up, much like in this picture right here. A 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit ruled Monday that the Stop Woke Act exceeds the bounds of the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment right to freedom of speech and expression in its attempt to regulate workplace through workplace trainings on race, color, sex, and national origin. The appeals court upheld a federal judge's August 2022 ruling that said the same. By limiting its restrictions to a list of ideas designated as offensive, the act targets speech based on its content. And by barring only speech that endorses any of those ideas, it penalizes certain viewpoints. The greatest First Amendment sin, Judge Britt C. Grant wrote in Monday's opinion. Now, what's interesting is we know who likes to peddle that First Amendment and bastardize it to no end. But what's very interesting is that when it affects them, then that's when they want to start making all of these changes. Now, keep in mind, one of the first thing that they mentioned was regulate on how they talk about race. Remember, this is also the same Rhonda Snowflake who wanted to snatch away certain parts of Black history out of the schools and replace it with some kind of fake PragerU kids material items that's not even accredited, by the way. I talked about that too. I keep telling y'all, everything this man did was really self-serving, more for himself and his own personal feelings rather than thinking of the collective. And this is the guy who is the governor of a state who, by the way, barely won. I keep telling people that because some people may forget or don't know. In case y'all are unaware or forgot, Rhonda Snowflake barely beat Andrew Gillum. Even after he was caught in that major scandal with the pictures and the hotel and all that stuff, Andrew Gillum still almost won, even with that happening. You would have thought with something as egregious as that, as controversial and scandalous as that Rhonda Snowflake would have beat him by a landslide. He didn't. He beat him by a small margin, which says that if Andrew Gillum's secret life did not get exposed the way that it did, or if he just wasn't doing that, he would have beat not only Ron DeSantis, but he would have beat him by a landslide, which means he still, even after that, had a lot of support. But you would think Ron DeSantis, the way he's running things down there, that he won by a landslide, and he really didn't. You can go back and look at those numbers for yourself. So if he could barely beat a man that got caught up in a scandal like that, what makes you think he was going to get far in this presidential run, which he didn't? He barely got by. He barely got it. This guy, we might have just called him barely DeSantis. The Stop Woke Act was approved by the Republican-controlled Florida legislature in March 2022. The act was one of DeSantis' top priorities, and before he dropped out as a possible candidate for president in 2024, it was a routine talking point on the campaign trail. Of course it was. But the thing is, not everyone as a collective is going to agree with that, and that's what I said too. That works for him in Florida, and there's even some people that's in Florida that don't agree with it. But if you think that the collective of all the other states is going to fall in line with that, you are sadly mistaken. That's why I said this act was very self-serving more than anything else. Yes, it was very anti-black, but on top of that, it was very self-serving to him and only him and people who think like him. Newsflash to Snowflake, the way that you think is actually kind of in the minority. Well, I take that back. It's a cross between the two. Because there's probably a lot more people out there, but I don't have the raw numbers to actually gauge that. Because some people will say how they feel, and some people won't. But as far as you want to talk about those who are out with it like he is, that's probably a small minority until proven otherwise. Offices for DeSantis and the Florida Attorney General did not immediately respond to requests for comments Monday night. Also referred to as the Individual Freedom Measure, the Stop Woke Act prohibits trainings in workplaces, public schools, colleges, and universities that could lead someone to feel guilty or ashamed about the historic actions of their race or sex. A violation of the act is an offense under state anti-discrimination laws, the Washington Post previously reported. Monday's ruling focused on the workplace-related provision of the law after Florida-based companies filed a lawsuit against the state. Honeyfund.com, an online wedding registry website in Clearwater, argued in court that the law would prevent it from holding an employee seminar about women's advancement in business and institutional racism. And those are two things that the Stop Woke Act was putting against. Really, all in all, that Stop Woke Act was basically a gift wrapped in a bow to comfort white people's feelings. That's really what it was. The Stop Woke Act was basically a defense bill for white people to use against people who were not white. In so many words, so if you weren't white, or a white male in particular, and I'll throw on another one if he was a white heterosexual male. So it protected those three entities the most when you think about how that Stop Woke Act really worked. Primo, a franchise of Ben & Jerry's ice cream with stores in Clearwater and Tampa, argued that it would be prevented from teaching employees about systemic racism, oppression, and intersectionality, the Post reported. DeSantis had framed the Stop Woke Act as a tool for employees to stand up against discrimination. Don't you love it when they frame it a certain way and it's not what it actually is? Like, come on now, it's called the Stop Woke Act. Have you seen how they bastardized it and the way that they use it online? Like, if people didn't see the forest from the trees from there, you might as well be blind. He and attorneys for the state argued in court that the measure is a ban on conduct. Private companies' requirement that employees attend such meetings, not speech, according to Monday's opinion. Grant, who was appointed by former President Donald Trump, disputed that claim. Florida's attempts to repackage its act as a regulation of conduct rather than speech do not work, Grant wrote in the opinion. Even if we presume that the act served the interest of combating discrimination in some way, its breadth and scope would doom it. Banning speech on a wide variety of political topics is bad. Banning speech on a wide variety of political viewpoints is worse. The group representing the companies suing the state called Monday's ruling a major victory for free speech in the workplace. Speech codes have no place in American society, and elected officials have no business censoring the speech of business owners simply because they don't agree with what's being expressed. Shalini Goel Agarwal, Protect Democracy Council, said in a statement. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's an L that the snowflake and his cronies, including the one that's standing next to him, will have to hold. But that doesn't mean he's not going to continue to fight for it and, keep it moving. But again, how far did he actually think this Stop Woke Act thing was going to actually go? Again, this only works in a certain part, and that's in his state. And it looks like it's not even working there since they ended up blocking it from extending further than the reach that it already has, which honestly, this action even been drafted and posted in the first place. Because again, we know who it is going against. We know who it's going against. He's expressed that. Ron the Snowflake is staunchly anti-black. Again, look at the company he keeps. Christopher Rufo. Like I said, it's a handful of people that if you see someone standing near them or next to them, like a photo op, just know that person is very anti-black. And Christopher Rufo is as anti-black as they come.